Hey everyone, it's that math magician, and on this video, I'd like to talk about the substitution method and show how we can use that in order to solve a system of equations. Now on the left side, you can see my system. I have two different equations. The first is y equals negative 3x, and the second equation is 4x plus y equals 2. Now, how to determine whether or not the substitution method is your best method on solving is by looking at your two equations. Since this top equation up here has a variable isolated, so I see that my y is already all by itself, that is kind of your way of knowing that we want to use substitution method. And I'm going to go ahead and write that out as a little note here. When you have a variable isolated, that's how you know you want to use substitution method, because it'll make solving it a lot easier. Now for our first step, what I want to do is I want to write down my second equation that doesn't have the variable isolated. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this equation here and I'm going to rewrite it. I have 4x plus y equals 2. Now here is where the substitution method comes into play. Again, I want to look at the equation where my variable is isolated. That is this top equation here. And I know that y equals negative 3x. That means wherever I see a y, I can just replace that y with a negative 3x. And looking here on my second equation, I see that I have a y right here and a y right here, right? I just rewrote the equation. So what that means is I can take this second equation, which is 4x plus y equals 2, but instead of writing y, instead what I can write is what y equals, and y equals negative 3x. So instead of writing plus y, I'm going to write plus negative 3x, because that's what y equals. And the whole reason why we do this is now I have an equation where I only have one variable. I have only x variables here. I have gotten rid of the y variable, and now I'm able to solve this problem. So let's go ahead and solve this out. So I have 4x. I'm just going to clean this up because I have plus negative 3x. Well, if you have a plus negative 3x, that's just the same as writing it as minus 3x equals 2. Now I have 4 x's. I take 3 of them away. So 4x minus 3x just leaves you with 1x, or you can just write it as x, and x equals 2. So now I know that my x variable equals 2. Now for the next step, since I've found what x equals, I now need to find out what y equals. And this is actually a little more easier with the substitution method, because I'm now going to look back at my first equation, because this first equation will help me find out what y equals. So I'm going to go ahead and take that equation, y equals negative 3, but instead of writing x, I now know what x equals. X equals 2. So instead of writing negative 3x, I'm going to write negative 3 times 2, because our x equals 2. Okay, let me go ahead and highlight that so we can see that x equals 2. So I'm changing my x there to be 2. And now we just have to solve this. Well, negative 3 times 2, that just becomes negative 6. So y ends up equaling negative 6. So how we write our final answer is we want to write it as an ordered pair. And an ordered pair is just an xy coordinate. Well, I know that x equals 2 and that y equals negative 6. So I'm going to go ahead and put those numbers as so. It'll be 2, comma, negative 6. And that is how we write our final answer. Now for our final step, whenever we solve a system of equations and we end up with an ordered pair answer, it's always good for us to check our work. So we do want to make sure that we check our solution, because we want to make sure that what we got is actually the correct answer. And here is how you check your work. all you have to do is take your answer and substitute it back into both equations to make sure that they both check out. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I have this equation here. My first equation is, let me go ahead and draw a line here so we can separate it. My check is that I know that my first equation is y equals negative 3x. But this time, I'm now going to substitute in my x and y values. So instead of writing y, I know that y equals negative 6. So I'm going to write negative 6 there. Equals negative 3 times my x, well my x is 2. And let's just go ahead and check and make sure that this still works. So I have negative 6 equals, and negative 3 times 2, that gives us negative 6. And negative 6 does equal negative 6, so this checks out. That lets me know that our solution works for our first equation. Now, we have two equations, so we just need to check that it works with the second equation. So I'm going to go ahead and write out our second equation, 4x plus y equals 2. And again, I'm going to do the same thing, and I want to verify that the last step is a true statement. So I have 4x. Well, I know that my x equals 2. So I'm going to substitute the 2 in, plus, and our y equals negative 6. And that equals 2. So again, all I've done is taken the x and the y and substituted in our values for x and y so that we can check, right? The whole point of this is to make sure that our answer is the correct solution. So 4 times 2, well, that gives me 8, plus negative 6, well, plus a negative is just the same as minus. So 8 minus 6 equals 2. And let's see, 8 minus 6, well, that does indeed give us 2. And 2 equals 2. This checks out. So that is how I know that this solution here is the correct answer for this problem, because I was able to get 2 check marks when I checked my solution. If I had checked this, and instead of getting negative 6 equals negative 6, I got negative 6 equals 5, well, that definitely is not correct. And then I would know that whatever answer I got over here, that it wouldn't be correct. Okay? So hopefully this video helps break down substitution method. Okay, just to recap what we did, you want to take your isolated variable, you want to substitute that in to your second equation, which is what I did here on this step. Then we just simplify and solve for the one variable. We had x equals 2. Once you find the first x value, you want to substitute that back in to get your y value. And then you want to write your answer as an ordered pair. And the final step is making sure that you're checking your work. So you don't need an answer key for this assignment, because you get to just check your work to verify that you got the right answer. If you do this when you're checking your work and you end up with an X, then you know that you don't have the correct answer. And you'll have to look back at your work and see if you made any mistakes. All right, I will see you guys in the next video.